Hello, welcome to Legal Action. My name is David Siegel. Today we're going to be talking about real estate, everything from the purchase to the sale to the contract. Joining me once again is my co-host, Jesse Barrientos. Jesse, welcome today.
Hey, thank you, Dave.
You have a lot of experience in real estate, both from a buy and a sell standpoint. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. And
real estate right now is kind of in turmoil. There's a lot of properties on the market. There's a lot of issues regarding short sales and foreclosures. Before we even get into the actual real estate contract, what is your understanding of the state of real estate right now?
Well, it definitely is a buyer's market, not so much for the sellers. I think if you can afford to hang on to it or to explore some other options, then that's what you should do.
Are things starting to pick up? Are things moving? We're moving into the spring, summer of 2009 as we air this. Are you seeing any change?
Well, I'm not seeing a really huge change. Traditionally, you're right that the spring is the real estate season, and there'll be real estate sales and purchases and everything else. But I don't think we're going to see them in the volume that we've seen them, historically in the past.
Sure. Now, a lot of people have decided to let go of their property, either through foreclosure or a bankruptcy, and just abandon their interest in the property. But for others who have some equity and are desiring to sell it, now is the time, is it not?
That's the time. Yeah.
Okay. What's the first step someone needs to do when they're ready to actually put their house on the market?
Well, you really need to have a good idea in terms of the value of your real estate. The way to do that, you could do that a couple ways. One way is to hire an appraiser. That's going to cost you, depending upon the size of your property and everything else, probably somewhere around $300-400. Roughly, each appraiser is a little bit different, and they will specifically appraise that property. You can go to a real estate agent, and what they'll do is kind of a market analysis, and they'll compare your property with properties within about a mile and a half radius of your house that are comparable in square footage and style and accommodations and everything else, and they'll arrive at a price that they think it's worth. Ultimately, the price is determined whatever a willing purchaser is willing to pay a buyer.
Right.
I mean, that's kind of
that's what's so difficult right now, that with so many properties on the market and very few selling, and we have an increase in foreclosures still, and the market values are dropping in a lot of properties, it's hard to pinpoint what the property is worth. So really, you just need to get an estimate and get it listed, right?
Right. Well, I mean, you need to find out what it is because, for example, let's say a lot of people sometimes have unrealistic expectations of what the property is worth. Oh, I've lived here for 20 years, and I put the second addition on all by myself. It's all hand carved wood or anything else, and that's great and that's nice. But again, I think sometimes they have an unrealistic expectation of what it's going to bear. So before you even going to sell it, you're going to need to find out what it's, kind of get an idea of the value, because then you need to determine, okay, what do you owe on it? Your mortgage, maybe your second mortgage or anything else. What's the selling price? You need to factor in the realtor fees, and the realtor fees can be anything, and that's negotiable too.
Well, wait a minute. You're jumping ahead. What if you want to sell it by yourself? Would you recommend that and save on the realtor fees?
You can certainly try to sell it on yourself, and they have other places, and you guys know what I'm talking about in terms of those places that allows you to sell it on your own. And if you want to try it and you're not in a hurry, go for it. I mean, you could list it in the papers and do other kind of things. Some of these places that allows you to do it by yourself, I believe that there's a fee, but they also put it on MLS listing so that other people can see, other realtors who are looking for people who are trying to purchase property to kind of see that. If you do it yourself without that, it doesn't get listed on there, and the exposure for the property. In other words, people don't know that it's available, short of whether or not you've got it maybe listed in the paper or on Craigslist or however else you have it, to kind of do that thing.
I think in a declining market like it is today, there's no substitute for a qualified, talented realtor who can list your property,
right,
get people to come through, help the homeowner with some tips on how to spruce it up and,
sure,
and basically what range the price should be in. So let's say you have a realtor.
Sure, and especially someone from that area, someone who's familiar with that area, would be very helpful as well.
Right. Well, you don't want somebody who's out of the area, they won't know the market value and they won't be able to show the property.
Right.
But let's say you've hooked up a realtor, you've agreed on an asking price to sell it. What's the next step?
Well, the next step, hopefully, is that people will be interested, people will come. There are all kinds of things that realtors do to try to stimulate interest in the property. So let's just suppose now you've listed it, and you have your first couple or first individual coming through to kind of look at that. They're going to look at it. They're going to try to make a decision. Very often what happens is when somebody goes to purchase a property, they're not just going to come and look at one property. They're going to make the most of their time and look at several properties, and then try to make a decision based upon their specific needs, and and kind of narrow it down based on price, based
Compare
on
the
location.
properties based on the price and the
Exactly
accommodations
right. Yeah.
inside. All right, well, let's say Joe Buyer actually comes through. Maybe the property was on for months, but Joe Buyer wants it. He has signed an initial contract that was provided by his realtor, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, now this initial contract is very important. What's the most important thing about this contract?
Well, I kind of think it's the price term.
Okay, because that's the one thing that we cannot change.
That's the one thing that you can't change, and we'll get through those other options in the contract. There are a whole bunch of different terms, and your realtor can explain it to you. But that's why you want to get a real estate attorney, somebody who can explain those things to you and stay on top of the deadlines. You're going to have your, of course, your purchase price. You're going to have your what they call your mortgage contingency date, which is a date by which the buyer has to have secured a mortgage commitment.
Yes.
Subject to to the ordinary things, for example, title and the HUD or settlement statement, or survey, those kinds of things, because that won't happen until very close to the closing. So usually it'll be set out maybe 30, 40 days. It can go kind of either way. It depends upon the lender.
Sure.
And the thing with that term, though, is that is an opportunity for the purchaser, for the buyer, to get out of the contract, because once you get to that period of time, and if the buyer doesn't have a mortgage commitment, one of two things could happen. He could ask for an extension, and typically the owners will, the sellers will grant those extensions, and they happen all the time for various reasons. Or the buyer can say, because I tried, I didn't get a mortgage commitment, and therefore I'm canceling the contract, and I want my earnest money back, and we're all good to go.
All right. Well, what I have in my hand is a multi-board residential real estate contract, which is typically what a lot of folks use. And this has all the items and all the paragraphs and topics that are needed when we do a closing. And let's run through some of those. We mentioned the price being the most important.
Sure.
Where's the price listed on this? Is that paragraph 4?
Yeah, on this specific contract, they update them, from time to time here. But yeah, that's going to be one of the very first. Well, one of the very first terms is the parties, the actual real estate, identifying that, what's going to be conveyed with the real estate. In other words, is it going to be the stove and refrigerator, the washer and dryer? Are they coming?
What's included in the
right? What's
purchase?
included in all those kind of things? Purchase price. We've talked about the mortgage contingency, which is very important.
Okay. What about the closing date? That's paragraph 6 here. There's a closing date that's listed. Is that a hard line date that has to be complied with, or is there some flexibility on when the parties can actually finalize the closing?
There is flexibility. However, my position is if it's in the contract and your closing is on this date, okay, and it depends on which perspective. If I'm looking from a purchaser perspective and I'm buying it and the closing date is tomorrow, and I've got everything done, and everything's approved, and we're ready, there should be no reason why you, Mr. Seller, can't comply with it. I mean, there are emergencies and other kinds of things, okay? So,
sure.
But on the other foot, if I'm the seller, and I'm ready, and I want to sell it, and I want to get out, and we have our closing scheduled for tomorrow, but Mr. Buyer, your lender, is not ready to close because there's more information they need from you, or perhaps they need the survey or the updated title policy or anything like that. So it's not really written in stone 100%, but it really depends on which perspective
But
you're
it has
on.
to be coordinated, because more likely than not, that seller needs those sale proceeds to put down something on another closing for another purchase.
Yes.
But that moves us into paragraph 7, which talks about possession, when they actually can give up possession of the property. Let's talk a little bit about possession and how that works, including the possession escrow, which is included in this contract.
Sure. Generally, what you'll have is possession will be upon the closing. So when we do the closing, we'll, right after we do the closing, the papers are signed, the money is transferred, you get the keys, we're done. We're settled. You get the house, it's yours. It's called, actual, or constructive delivery. Actual delivery is, here's this cup, Dave, I just sold it to you, I'm giving it to you, and you take it. That's actual. A house, I really can't pick up a house unless maybe it's a dollhouse. I don't know. Okay, but I really can't pick it up and give it to you. So by giving you the keys, I'm giving you constructive possession. It's just a legal term for the house. Okay. But sometimes what'll happen is
what if I'm not ready to move?
If you're not ready to move and the buyers are okay with that, perhaps the buyers aren't ready to move either. They just want to conclude the deal, and maybe it's going to happen in the middle of the month, and they need a little bit more time because their lease is up at the end of the month, or whatever the case may be. There could be just a whole bunch of different reasons. We could do a possession escrow, which means I'm not going to give up possession at the time of closing. I'm going to stick around as the seller, but now the house no longer belongs to me, so I'm going to have to pay rent.
Yeah.
And the rent is going to be whatever you guys agree, and typically it's going to be enough to at least cover the mortgage.
Right. It's a daily rate, though. It's a per diem.
It's a per diem
rental,
depending upon where you're coming out. Exactly. You figure out what that is, and you break it down to whenever you're going to get out. And I mean, generally, when somebody buys a house, you don't have to pay your first mortgage payment for at least a month or so afterwards. So for the purchaser, it's not a bad deal because they're getting kind of some extra money.
You're assuming it's not a cash deal.
We're assuming that's correct.
Let's move on to paragraph 7, talking about tax proration.
Sure.
Because this is important. A lot of people don't understand how real estate taxes work, how they're paid,
right,
and tax prorations in a real estate contract specifically. Can you go into detail about that briefly?
I can, but I just want to step back just for 1 second,
sure,
because it's very important with respect to the post-possession closing. Not only are you going to have to pay that other person the whatever amount you agreed on, but they're going to take a certain amount, a percentage out, or a dollar amount, depending upon what you guys agree on. A lot of times it's a percentage of what your closing funds are, and they're going to hold it in escrow.
Yeah, often 2%, but not
right,
always that.
Not always.
Usually
it
2%.
Just depends. It depends how you're going to stay there, and that's to ensure that you're going to do what you're supposed to do, and you're going to pay, and you're not going to damage the property. So that being said, understand that when you come out of that closing, you're not going to have all of the money, the proceeds that you're expecting when you do that, because you have to put that up. You'll get the balance back after everything is done, and hopefully there's no problems or no issues, no damage, you've paid, and you're good to go, and that's that. But
okay,
to answer your question then,
tax prorations.
Tax prorations. Taxes are paid in arrears. So the taxes, or the tax bill that you're paying now, you're paying for last year. And so when you sell a house, I'm selling you the house, but you get everything with it. So I can't expect then, therefore, for you to pay for the taxes for the time I was living there. So what we do is we look at the last ascertainable tax bill, and we prorate it by, usually it's 105 or 110%. The buyer always wants it to be larger. The seller always wants to be lower, or well, not lower, but 100%. Less. Exactly. Generally, and again, it depends on the area. It really does. 105%, and that is to account for the increase in taxes, because taxes never go down. I shouldn't say never.
Right.
Rarely ever. Okay, there you go. I mean, we could, who knows, surprise us, okay? But, they really never go down, and so that's to make up the difference, because you are paying in arrears. And so you'll receive a credit on your, on your closing statement for those amount of taxes. Now, when the taxes come due, you'll have to pay it, but you've already received your credit.
Sure. One of the most important things regarding a real estate contract is the inspection period, which is provided for in the contract. Jesse, when is an inspection advisable?
Immediately, as soon as you sign the contract.
On any kind of property, right? Whether it be a townhouse, a single-family home,
right,
or a multifamily home.
Or multifamily. I even would advise it on on new construction. A lot of people think no new construction, but you know what? Hey, I don't know about the builder. I don't know if something's done right or not. Or for the amount of money that you're going to spend, a few $100, you know what? You might as well spend it. It's money well spent.
And this also gives you an opportunity to back out of the contract if it doesn't meet expectations.
It sure does. So you want to have that inspection, because you only have 5 days generally. Actually, let's talk about another provision in conjunction with this. That's the attorney's review provision.
That's the very next paragraph, paragraph 12.
And what that allows you to do is your attorney, or you as a seller through your attorney, can make changes to the contract, anything except for price. So you could change the closing date, you can change or request to change the proration. I usually do it in conjunction with the inspection provision at the same time, because just the inspection provision alone, you can only modify certain things with respect to that provision alone. For example, if something is working, if the heater is still working, it's working for the purpose for which it was intended. If it's a heater, air conditioner, whatever, as long as it's working, regardless of age, it's still good, and you
Right.
can't modify it through the inspection provision.
It just may not be efficient.
It just may not be efficient, but you can't. But through the attorney's review provision, when you use them in conjunction, you can request those kind of things. One thing for people to be aware of is that's an opportunity for the other party, for the seller, to cancel the contract too. So if we have a contract
Right.
and you have an inspection and you say, hey, you know what, I want a new roof, I want the furnace cleaned, I want the windows repaired, I want all these things, and you send that to me, I could say, you know what, I don't agree, and pursuant to the attorney's review and professional inspection provision, the contract is null and void, and the contract is terminated, and that's it. Now, is that really realistically going to happen? Probably not, but you might tick some people off because people are proud of their home, and they don't want all these little flaws, and they also don't want to get nickeled and dimed to death. But that's why it's important that you work with your realtor so that you market it at a price to account for what somebody's going to ask for. And trust me, they're going to ask for it.
Right. Now, if the property does not meet inspection and you decide not to go forward with it, and you notify the other party or the other party's attorney in writing within that attorney review period,
Right.
the contract is then null and void. Does the purchaser then get their earnest money back
They'll get their earnest money back, sure.
without any problem?
Well, you'd like to say,
I mean, if the contract's
theoretically,
null and void,
if
and
it's
you
null and
comply-
void and you give it back, then you give it back, and that's it. True enough.
What's
But
Plata survey?
the Plata survey, that's your survey with respect to the kind of blueprint of your property. It's going to show you all of the details. It's going to show you the boundary markers. It's going to show you the footage, the square footage. It's going to show you the measurements. Basically, what you're looking at on a survey is you want to make sure that in the boundaries of your property that you don't have your house isn't over the line, or there's a fence that's over the line, or there's a shed that's over the property line. And it's also going to show you any easements. The title will show you that too.
Let's talk about title, because that kind of goes part and parcel
Sure.
with a survey. What is the title to the property, and how do you find out?
The title is everything connected to that property. What's going to be connected is to any mortgages that's recorded against the property, any public easements for utilities and things like that, taxes for prior years. It's going to be those type of things that are connected to the property that have to be taken care of, to convey clear title.
Okay, so you want to make sure what you're buying doesn't have any unknown liens or any
Right.
tax liens on the property
Sure.
that weren't disclosed. You want to be buying it free and clear, basically, other than the lien that you're going to have put on it by your mortgage company, typically. Unless you're buying it for cash.
Now you're assuming you're not buying it for cash. Exactly right. Right. But
most deals are not for cash.
that's true. But the thing that you want to do, right, is you want to make sure that the title insurance is what's going to insure you if it's determined later that there was something that was against the property that they didn't catch. And so that's the whole purpose of the title insurance. They'll take care of those kind of issues. So basically, those when you have you're through your inspection period, now you're through the time where hey, listen, you've requested a modification. I might agree to it. I might agree to fix the roof or to fix whatever it is, or I might tell you, you know what, I don't agree to do any of that, but I'll give you a $5,000 credit. And so it goes back and forth.
Okay.
And then you might say, well, a new roof's going to cost me $10,000. How about a $6,000 credit? And then I might say, sorry, $5,000 nothing. Anyway, so once you've gotten through this period of time, because it's still a period of time where either party can cancel and terminate the contract. So once you've gotten through this period of time, now we have a deal, essentially, right? Now that's providing that the contract isn't contingent upon you, Mr. Buyer, selling your current residence, because sometimes that'll happen. And you need to, as a buyer or as a seller, you need to take that into consideration. A couple things. One is the person who's looking at your house, and a lot of times, there are a lot of good realtors out there, they're pre-qualified. Pre-qualified doesn't mean necessarily that they're going to get, they still have to go through the process. It just means that they're pre-qualified for whatever it is. Doesn't mean that they have that mortgage commitment, okay?
Right.
The second thing is, you want to make sure if the person, if they have to sell their house and buy your house, that's one more thing that can go wrong, because everything we just talked about in this transaction can happen in your transaction with the other person. It could fall through in everything else. And if you're buying my house, it's contingent upon you selling your house, and you don't sell your house, then I might have a problem.
And that's one of the things right now that's causing a big stall in the real estate market. Correct?
People just, I mean, houses just aren't really selling.
I mean, now is really a great time to rent a property as opposed to buy as well, correct?
Well, if you can rent it, I mean, yeah, but remember, it's a buyer's market out there. I mean, you know, and they have...
it's a buyer's market for first-time homeowners, I believe.
Well, first or second, because a lot of times people just want to sell the property, and they're willing to forego a whole bunch of the equity. You know, they're willing to really knock it down. You know,
we're also factoring in that person has good credit, because credit has been difficult to get. It's not the wild, wild west anymore like it was a few years ago.
That's correct.
You really have to be credit worthy. You have to have a good score, and you have to be buying within your means.
Right.
You can't be buying an $800,000 house if you're making $2,000 a month. You have to have certain qualifications. So it's sometimes hard to find a buyer who can qualify with good credit.
Right. Well, I mean, that's why, you know, if you come in with somebody who's pre-qualified, that's a good option. If you're lucky to have a couple people who are wanting to make an offer, and your choice is this person who's pre-qualified and his house isn't contingent, you know, the sale isn't contingent upon him selling his house, and this other guy who, you know, has either not pre-qualified or is, you know, it's going to be contingent upon his sale, right, then, you know, you might want to choose, you know, the person, because it just looks a little better.
Now, nobody wants to sell at the bottom of a market or as the market's declining. So a lot of people are actually just staying in their homes with the thought of selling it once they see a turnaround. Do you see a turnaround forthcoming in the next several months or several years?
I don't think the several months. I don't think several years. I'm hoping in the next couple of years that things will start to spring back. Even you know, coming up next year. I mean, it's just one of these things that's just so difficult. You really can't predict it.
What will make that change? As foreclosures continue to increase, what do you think will make that change when homes will actually start increasing in value?
Well, there's a lot of, well, in terms of increase in value, that's kind of difficult to say. I'm not sure. I mean, everything is really tied to the economy, but in terms of just the whole bigger picture, there's a lot of new legislation that's coming out with respect to lending. They're going to really tighten up on banks and lending institutions and everybody in terms of being able to sell to qualified people and having those disclosures. So it's not a question, Dave, where, okay, yeah, I can get you a loan, there's no problem, and we get you a loan, we lock in with an ARM for 3 years, and you know, you're paying $800, and now the 3 years is gone, interest rate jumps up, and now you have to pay $3,000 a month. That's kind of what's been happening.
Well, even with interest rates as low as they are historically, we have unemployment at a 25-year high.
Sure.
Okay. We have foreclosures that are still increasing. We have a stimulus that isn't stimulating anything as of yet. How in the world are things going to turn around? I mean, to me, this is just not a good time to do anything with real estate, buy or sell.
Well, I don't know about sell. I think it probably isn't a bad time to buy. I think that it's a buyer's market, and I know that there are a lot of good deals to be had out there.
But you're buying on the down still.
But that's the thing. Buy low and sell high, right?
Yeah, but you're on the down.
You're on the down.
The continued down. I don't think we've leveled out. I don't think we've flattened out.
Well,
I don't think we're at equilibrium yet.
Ideally, you want to buy at the very rock bottom, but you know, unless you have a crystal ball and you know when that rock bottom's going to be, you know, you really don't know. And so, you know, but
let's talk about some areas in our viewing audience that may be a good opportunity for people. How are things in DuPage County, in the western suburbs? How is the real estate market there?
Well, I love the western suburbs, I'll tell you. I live in the western suburbs. It's a really good place to live and to raise a family.
Yeah. And I don't know if you want to disclose that, but you just did.
That's okay.
We can redact that.
Western suburbs is a big place, okay? You know, there are a lot of nice places. There's a lot of nice places, I think, for sale. I think there's probably a lot of things, a lot of deals that people can get. Now, it might not be the deal that you're looking for. I mean, each place and location has their own, you know, own areas. You know, maybe some areas are better than others. Maybe some are a little more ritzy. Maybe some aren't. It just depends upon what's in your means. And I think the main thing is to stay within your means. If you can't afford to buy a house,
sure, don't
buy a house. If you have the means, you have the established work history and a little bit of funds set aside, and you know, you're able, hey, you know what, why not get a good deal on a property that you plan on staying in for the next several years?
How about for the benefit of some of our Will County viewers, where they might have built up a little bit too fast in this market, what would you say to that? Have you seen any activity in the Will County area?
Well, I think the Will County area is like pretty much the rest of us. I mean, there are real estate that is selling, but it's still not the same type. And here's the other thing too. You might be in a situation. It's ideal to hold on to it if you can, but you might be in a situation where you can't. A good example of that would be other than foreclosure or doing a bankruptcy or something like that, would be a divorce. If you're in the middle of a divorce and the house has to get divided, then what do you do? I mean, and I think.
Well, then you're in almost a forced sale situation where they have to reduce the price to liquidate it so that the parties can have some moving money.
Perhaps, or I think that probably a lot of people are just toughing it out and sticking together because it's cheaper to stick together than it is to go ahead and sell everything at this current time.
Yeah, well, I think that's true because we have seen the divorce rates decline as of late, and I think that's a combination of the inability to pay the filing fees because those have increased, as well as the inability to move out and afford your own housing, whether it be a rental or not. It's cheaper to stay together, split those expenses, wait till things turn around, and then maybe look to separate.
Or maybe even, heck, during that time, try to reconcile. What's wrong with that?
I'm all for that. Reconciliation is fantastic if you can do it. Some marriages are irretrievably broken down and they can't do that, but they're still living in the same premises
for money,
for economy reasons.
Sure, exactly.
We just have a couple minutes left, Jesse. I want you to just tell us basically about the most important aspects, contract-wise, in a nutshell, regarding real estate.
Well, there's a couple important things that we didn't touch on. Let me try to get through that really quickly here.
Sure.
When you sign your contract, there's the residential real estate, the property disclosure report, and it asks you to make disclosures on defects in your property. My advice to you is if you know about a defect, even if you repaired or anything, make that disclosure because I've been involved, and I know that you've been had a part of that too in litigation involving the disclosure. And you know what? It's just going to cost you some more money. So be truthful and list on there exactly what it is. But the main things you want to do is you want to make sure that you get a good realtor. You want to make sure that you get a good lawyer who does real estate and who's going to pay attention to those deadlines because those deadlines can be fatal if you fail to do something within the amount of time. For example, your mortgage contingency, and your attorney doesn't send out an extension letter, and you don't end up getting the mortgage. You're stuck. You're stuck. You have to meet those deadlines. And then I would also, be very attentive to the process and want to know exactly. I would actually read what I'm signing, Dave. How about that? That's a very good tip too. Look what you're doing, and then take it slow. If you have questions, don't think that you're asking stupid questions. The only stupid question you ask is the one that you don't ask. So, be involved in the process. Ask your attorney.
Right. And you don't have to sign it on the spot. You can take it home. You can review it. You can ask questions of your attorney, of your realtor. There's nothing that says you have to do the contract right on the spot.
Right. And that's what I would suggest. If you can, talk it over with the attorney before you would sign it.
Yeah. So basically, get a team together, get an attorney on board, get a realtor on board.
That's right.
They probably have recommendations on a good inspector because you're probably not going to be able to know that on your own.
Right.
And basically go through all the steps and learn as much as you can about real estate and how the contract works so you make a good deal.
Right. It's a big investment. This is probably one of the biggest investments of your life. And you know what? There is nothing better than real estate in terms of, I think, an investment, especially if it's going to be your home.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jesse.
You're welcome, Dave.
Hope you enjoyed it. This was Real Estate Legal Action. Dave Siegel with Jesse Barrientos. We'll see you next time. Thank you.